The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow over the rows of steel drawers lining the morgue walls. Li Ming ran a trembling finger down the clipboard, counting each tag twice. The numbers didn't add up. 7 intake forms, 6 bodies. His breath fogged in the frigid air as he checked again, his pulse hammering against his throat. The newest arrival, Jane Doe from the river, her waterlogged skin still glistening under the sheet, was gone. He wiped his palms on his lab coat and pulled up the security footage. The timestamp showed the past hour playing out in grayscale silence, the empty gurney parked where it belonged, the morgue doors undisturbed. No one entered, no one left. Yet when the camera panned back to the storage wall, the drawer labeled T7 stood conspicuously ajar. A damp stain darkened the floor beneath it, smelling of mildew and something coppery. The intercom crackled to life, making him jerk upright. Static hissed, then a voice whispered his name, not through the speaker, but from the refrigeration unit behind him. Li Ming spun around. The metal doors vibrated faintly, as if someone inside was shifting their weight. His radio suddenly blared an emergency alert from the ER, but when he answered, all he heard was wet, rhythmic choking. A drop of ice, cold water trickled down his neck from the ceiling. He looked up. There, smeared across the tiles in a dark, dripping trail, was the silhouette of a handprint. Fresh. The fluorescent lights flickered faintly as Li Ming stepped deeper into the morgue storage area, the hum of the refrigeration units filling the eerie silence. His breath fogged in the cold air, each exhale shallow with growing unease. Then he saw them, wet footprints glistening on the linoleum floor, trailing from the main corridor into the shadowy rows of steel cabinets. The water was fresh, as though something had just passed through, but the morgue had been empty. His pulse quickened. He followed the footprints, the squelch of his own shoes suddenly loud in the stillness. They led to an older freezer unit at the far end, its lock rusted but still secured. Yet, as Li Ming approached, the door shuddered slightly, its hinges creaking as though strained by an unseen force. Then came the sound, scritch, scratch, like fingernails dragging slowly, deliberately, across the metal interior. His blood turned to ice. Leaning closer, he pressed his ear to the frost-lined door. The scratching stopped, a wet, guttural whisper seeped through the gap, so faint he almost missed it. Elmiangish, it knew his name. Before he could react, the door trembled violently, the lock groaning under sudden pressure. Stumbling back, Li Ming's flashlight beam caught the ghostly outline of fingers pressing against the other side of the door. Pale, bloated, trailing strands of riverweed. The scratching resumed, now frenzied, desperate. The freezer door rattled, bucking against its latch, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stilled. Only the echo of dripping water remained. Li Ming stood frozen, staring at the footprints, now pooling into a dark puddle at his feet. The fluorescent lights flickered erratically as Emin stepped into the deserted hospital corridor, his breath visible in the icy air. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant drip of a leaky faucet. Then he saw her, a figure standing at the far end of the hallway, motionless. Her soaked dress clung to her emaciated frame, water pooling at her bare feet. Her skin was unnaturally pale, almost translucent, like parchment stretched over bone. Emin's pulse quickened as he took an involuntary step forward, his training warring with instinct. "Hello," he called, his voice echoing unnaturally. The figure didn't respond. He pulled out his flashlight, the beam cutting through the dimness. The light revealed strands of dark, wet hair obscuring her face. Then, with a slow, jerky movement, her head turned. Not in a natural arc but in a sudden, impossible twist, her neck craning backward until her hollow eyes locked onto his. Her lips parted, stretching into a smile that was too wide, too wrong. No teeth, just darkness. A gurgling sound rose from her throat, like water choking a drain. Li Ming stumbled back, his spine hitting the wall. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of damp rot. He blinked, and she was closer now, her skeletal fingers twitching at her sides. Water trickled from her sleeves, forming tiny rivulets on the linoleum. The overhead lights buzzed, then died. In the pitch black, something wet brushed against his ankle. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the suffocating darkness. When the emergency lights flickered back on, the corridor was empty, except for a trail of watery footprints leading straight to where he stood. And at his feet, a single, sodden hospital wristband, the name faded into illegibility. His radio crackled to life with static, then a whisper, "You're next." The dim light of the hospital's break room flickered as old Zhang, the elderly cleaner, slowly poured a cup of tea. His gnarled hands trembled slightly as he sat across from Li Ming, whose face was pale from the night's horrors. "You've seen her, haven't you?" Zhang murmured, his voice like dry leaves rustling. Li Ming stiffened, the warmth of the tea doing nothing to chase away the chill creeping up his spine. Zhang sighed, his milky eyes distant. 10 years ago, a young woman drowned in the basement near the morgue. They say she was running from something, or someone. Her body vanished before the police arrived. The water pipes burst that night, just like tonight. He paused, gripping the cup tighter. They never found her, but she never left. She lingers, hungry for a replacement. Li Ming's throat tightened. Why hasn't anyone talked about this? Zhang gave a grim chuckle. The hospital buried it. But the staff who worked here back then, they quit, or vanished. Some say she pulls them into the water, drags them down where she's trapped. His voice dropped to a whisper. She won't stop until someone takes her place. A sudden crash echoed from the hallway. A mop bucket toppling over, water spilling across the tiles. Li Ming jumped, but Zhang didn't flinch. She's here now, he said simply. And she's chosen you. Footsteps sloshed through the puddle outside, slow and deliberate. Li Ming's breath hitched as the door creaked open, revealing nothing but the dark, wet corridor beyond. The air smelled of damp and something far older, far colder. Zhang's cup slipped from his hands, shattering on the floor. Run, he whispered. Before she finishes what she started. But it was already too late. The water on the floor rippled, against the pull of gravity, toward Li Ming's shoes. The flickering fluorescent light in the archives cast long shadows across the dusty shelves as Li Ming pored over the yellowed documents. His hands trembled as he pulled out the file labeled Unidentified Female, Case for 1147. The moment he opened it, the air grew thick with the scent of damp rot, though the paper felt bone dry under his fingers. The black and white photograph clipped to the corner showed the woman's pale, waterlogged face, her lips slightly parted as if frozen mid-scream. As Li Ming scanned the report, a cold draft snaked down his spine. The cause of death was listed as asphyxiation, but the details were obscured by dark stains that looked disturbingly like water damage. When he looked back at the photo, her eyes, previously closed, were now wide open, the pupils impossibly black, drilling into him. He recoiled, the file slipping from his grip. The pages scattered across the floor, and when he gathered them, the typed words had shifted. The clinical jargon had morphed into frantic, uneven handwriting. She's not gone, the water is so cold, and finally, in bold, slashing letters that bled into the paper, Juwa, save me. A distant drip echoed from the pipes, the rhythm matching the pounding of his heart. The light above him buzzed violently before exploding in a shower of sparks, plunging the room into darkness. In the blackness, he could hear it. A wet, gurgling whisper, so close it brushed against his ear, "You'll warm me up." The fluorescent lights above flickered erratically, casting jagged shadows across the morgue's tiled floor. Li Ming's breath hitched as he heard the sudden drip, 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 an impossible sound in the sterile silence. Then came the gurgle. The pipes along the ceiling shuddered, groaning like something alive, before bursting open with a wet splitting crack. Thick, crimson liquid poured out in a torrent, splattering the walls and pooling across the floor. The stench hit him first, metallic and rotting, like old blood left to fester. Li Ming staggered back, his boots slipping in the viscous fluid. The liquid wasn't just spreading, it was rising, inching up his ankles as if pulled by some unseen tide. Then, the water stirred. A hand breached the surface, fingers curled like a corpse's rigor mortis clutch. The nameless woman emerged slowly, her sodden hair clinging to bloated skin, her white dress heavy with red. Her head lolled forward, then snapped up with unnatural speed. The eyes, Li Ming's stomach turned, were black pits, leaking the same dark fluid as the pipes. His talkie crackled to life. A colleague's voice, shrill with panic, "We're getting calls. The sink's on the 3rd floor, they're all." The transmission dissolved into a wet scream, then silence. Li Ming's own scream died in his throat as the woman's lips peeled into a grin, her jaw unhinging with a sickening pop. The lights went out. In the dark the sloshing grew louder, closer. Something brushed his leg, cold, grasping. The last thing he heard was a whisper, swirling up from the blood water. "And now you'll stay with me." The fluorescent lights flickered weakly as the night shift supervisor, Zhang, pushed open the door to the morgue. The sharp metallic scent of disinfectant stung his nose, but beneath it, something foul lingered. A damp, organic musk. His heart clenched when he saw the slumped figure near the freezer units. Li Ming, his face a lifeless gray, lay motionless on the tiled floor, his skin so cold it burned to the touch. Zhang recoiled, pulse hammering in his throat. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Frantic, Zhang grabbed his radio, calling for medical assistance, but only static hissed back. His fingers trembled as he checked Li Ming's pulse. Nothing. Yet the body wasn't stiff. It felt pliable, like meat just out of the freezer. His breath clouded in the chilled air as he turned toward the rows of steel drawers, counting them out of habit. One was missing. Again. That's when he noticed the streaks on the floor, thick, glistening trails of moisture leading from Li Ming's unconscious form toward the exit. Wet footprints, too small to be a man's, dotted the path. Blood roared in his ears as he turned to the security monitor. The grainy footage showed a dark figure dragging something heavy behind it. Something that looked disturbingly like Li Ming. But the face of the figure was blurred, as if submerged under water. By dawn, Li Ming was gone. The hospital director, pale and sweating, demanded silence. The morgue log now showed the correct number of bodies, but Zhang knew the truth. The freezer creaked, its hinges groaning softly. A sound like fingernails on metal echoed from inside. And when Jiang dared to look back at the monitor one last time, the blurred figure was no longer dragging Li Ming away, it was standing right behind him. Smiling.